So I just had a moment of trigger. I was listening to something which was a very good message, and I was triggered when the message got to talking about binding and loosening. And a lot of times we hear messages, we hear these terms, these terms, and we believe them. And man, we go towards them. We start to act out what we just heard, and um, but with God, man, God is not a man. God is not a man. So what is God saying? So basically, what I just heard, and I've heard this before, but I love how God expands truth. So we get truth, we get wind of it, and then we hear it another way, and it goes deeper. It goes deeper. But where does it go? Where is the ending at? So I heard about the binding and loosening, and we know what to bind. You know what I mean? Because we know what we don't want to see in our lives, and then it says but we don't know what to loose. And then the person goes on to kind of say, how do we what is it that we loose? And they painted a picture of in essence the heart of God and what we are to loose. But as I was listening to it, I felt the Holy Spirit say, nudge me, bah, 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 bah. Did you catch that? Not did you catch what you just heard, but did you catch what you just heard from me? So I felt like what we do that is kind of like in ignorance, and ignorance is not, it's not a bad word. You know what I mean? I remember when we first heard you ignorant. You know what I'm saying? The way somebody says it make you feel like it's bad, but it's just you don't know. So you don't know what you don't know until you realize you didn't know it because you just found out something new, right? So what I realized God was saying is this: how many times do we hear messages, do we hear lessons, and we run towards what we think we heard, and we start to practice what it is that we believe we heard? Most of the time, it doesn't yield the result that we thought we would get because we felt like the revelation got deeper. I don't know how many times you've heard messages on binding and loosening or anything that you've tried and you have attempted endlessly, only to never get to where you think you should be. You know what I'm saying? Because you received, or it felt like it went someplace deeper. So binding and loosening. What is God saying? What is he pointing at? God is telling us all these things point to a man. All these things point to a person. A person. From the New Testament, the Old Testament points to something. It points to Jesus. The New Testament reveals Jesus. So if everything is describing a person, then what is it that binding and loosening, just that one thing, what is that aiming at? How does it work for us? It works for us when we agree with and we practice what it means to be the person. And I say practice because I don't got another way to say it. So meaning we are learning the attitude and the language of God. So how God thinks and how God speaks, how God sees, how God imagines is where we're called to live from. So binding and loosening is an attitude. Binding and loosening is an attribute and a characteristic of a person. So God is calling us to stand firm in our new identity. Now, I agree that we can understand it. Man, I get the new identity thing, but I've been trying to believe it, and I've been trying to say the things that the new identity says, but it ain't working. I don't see no fruit from it. Well, that's because you haven't expressed it enough so that it becomes a part of you. That's the whole thing. I said this before. So out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So there will come a time that out of your heart, as you're practicing presence, as you're practicing identity, as you're learning to say and see how God sees, it's going to start automatically coming out. So when you get to binding and loosening, you're now binding and loosening from the person. You're not binding and loosening halfway in and halfway out. You're not binding and loosening from a theory that you've heard as a man. So as a man, I'm hearing these concepts and these ideas, and I'm saying them, but I'm saying them outside of the identity, so it can't produce me what the identity can. I said it before, when God created everything, it was purposed from being used from a person that is completely occupied and occupying the identity. If Adam and Eve hadn't have sinned, they would have been in identity 1,000, and they would have been able to have dominion and authority God's way. Jesus provided us that place once again. So now we can operate from identity, but you cannot operate God's stuff, God's plan outside of the identity, even when you think you're a Christian. I'm not saying that you're not, but there's a process, man. And we've been so long living outside of the process or outside of the identity that he's almost got us on fast forward. He's like, man, y'all have been here too long. You've been trying to operate God's stuff out of God's identity for too long. Now let's get it right. Let's receive who we are, and let's speak from that person. And then when you bind and when you loose, you're now binding and loosening from the person and not just what the person says. I pray that made sense, y'all. Pastor Jamal, Rising Ground. Let's get it. I'll talk to you. Peace.